The 10-hour ordeal for Madeleine Pulver ended just after midnight. After being reunited with her family, she was taken to hospital for
Police in Sydney, Australia are still looking for a masked man who chained a fake bomb to a young woman's neck after breaking into her family's home yesterday. Nick Ralston has been following the story for the Sydney Morning Herald.
But first tonight, it's hard to imagine what the Pulver family from Mosman in Sydney have been through in the past 24 hours, or why anyone would put them through it. 18-year-old Madeleine had what she thought was a bomb around her neck.
2 bomb disposal experts, 2 negotiators, and 10 terrifying hours. That's what it took to get what authorities call the, quote, very elaborate device believed to be a power bomb off the neck of Australia.
There are few news stories that will compel audiences worldwide and continue to captivate them for days. When presented with this rare opportunity, some news organisations have been accused of inundating audiences with too much information on the event, hence undoing any initial news value the story had by overwhelming audiences, resulting in them losing interest. It was in such circumstances that the media coverage of the Madeleine Pulver bomb hoax scandal occurred, making it a prime example of this phenomenon. This research project aims to analyse the Madeleine Pulver bomb hoax scandal in terms of media coverage. By analysing a sample of reports from news organisations at each level, this project will endeavour to find what made the incident, which received local, national and international coverage, relevant to media organisations and their audiences. News coverage of the Pulver bomb hoax was intense, with breaking reports leading local news bulletins and reports appearing worldwide within hours. Journalists were stationed outside the family's home until after midnight when the victim was released. Police held regular press conferences throughout the 10-hour ordeal. Mosman even trended on Twitter worldwide as a result of the bomb hoax. The content analysis was broken down into local, national and international reports. 8 articles were analysed per category. Then each was deconstructed based on the following criteria. There were 5 main findings from the content analysis. Firstly, in local reports, the victim's name was used most, promoting a sense of familiarity. But internationally, terms such as teenager, victim and bomb girl were favoured as opposed to Madeleine Pulver.
Police in Sydney, Australia are still looking for a masked man who chained a fake bomb to a young woman's neck.
Teenager Madeleine Pulver has returned to school less than a week after an intruder chained a fake bomb around her neck.
Further proof of saturation of news occurring is evident in the excessive details that were reported on. Locally, Channel 10 sent a reporter on location to Madeleine's school hockey game to illustrate how well she was moving on from the ordeal.
Her friends hugged her when she arrived, and I've got to say she's in fine form too. She even stopped a couple of goals.
An irrelevant graphic regarding the members of the Pulver family appeared in several online publications, including Perth Now. The Taipan link was made in a Sydney publication, but then filtered through to a Canadian news source. Thirdly, there was no trend that occurred in viewer participation. Results for both comments and social media shares varied. At all levels, local, national and international, there were examples of stories which received none as well as a lot of viewer participation. There was also one outstanding result in the international category. Surprisingly, of all the categories, nationally run stories were the most sensationalised, including headlines which referred to the victim as a teen heiress. They also tended to copy a lot of local stories, simply changing the headline and keeping the body. Finally, in all categories, analysis found the TV stories were very broad and generally focused on a narrative report of the event, whereas the print articles were very specified. For example, Mosman bomb scare, Winona's school to support students. Although audience interest once matched the saturation of the news, the media was quickly criticised for hounding the family in the days that followed the scandal, despite repeated requests for privacy. The most obvious evidence that the media was being overzealous with coverage of the bomb hoax is that the victim's father had to repeatedly ask the media to go away. ABC's media analysis and commentary program Media Watch clearly noticed this matter as well, dedicating most of that week's program to the scandal.
Meanwhile, here in Australia, we've had our own sensational story, the Great Necklace Bomb Hoax. It was no doubt a gruelling experience for young Madeleine Pulver. No wonder the next day her father had a request to make to the media.
From our family's perspective, we are clearly extremely eager for our lives to return to normal. and we have a daughter that is on the cusp of doing HSC exams. So our request to you is that you respect our privacy following this and leave us to get on with our lives.
Now, on Friday morning, eager to help Madeleine return to a normal life, they clustered outside the Pulvers' house from daybreak onwards.
For those 10 unimaginable hours, these were the words Madeleine Pulver feared she might never live to say.
How are you feeling, Maddie? I'm okay, thank you.
As Nine's Simon Boda so concisely put it,
with the world watching this most extraordinary case, the Pulvers just want life to return to normal.
I'll bet Bill Pulver reckoned life was getting back to normal on Saturday morning when he went out for the papers in his jammies and Ugg boots to find the press pack still there. Next morning, Sunday, Maddie and her mum were moving on, as 7 News put it. But the press pack wasn't.
I'm very proud of her. She's a very brave girl.
Life goes on. Madeleine and a friend head off on a walk with the family dog.
Sushi and smiles with friends.
Only 5 days after the incident, the Pulvers had clearly had enough.
The family has now taken the decision to make no further comment.
In terms of theoretical reasoning for news reporting in this situation, basically, agenda setting is what allowed the saturation of the media to occur, while gatekeeping is what should have prevented it from happening. Agenda setting is a key aspect of the news cycle, as the time constraints placed on news organisations forces them to concentrate on a few topics that they deem the most newsworthy. McCombs and Valenzuela have identified 3 distinct consequences agenda setting has in affecting audiences: forming, priming and shaping opinions. Explaining the repetition of messages about public issues in the news day after day, along with the pervasiveness of the mass media in our daily lives, constitutes a major source of journalism's influence on the audience. Naturally, the zeal with which the bomb hoax scandal was reported on matched audience interest at one stage. After the initial interest in the event dies down, how does the media decide when the agenda should move on? McCombs and Valenzuela believe the agenda was set early on by mainstream Sydney media outlets, which continued to cover the scandal for days. This then filtered into national and international reports. It was this practice of agenda setting that led to the excessive media coverage of the Madeleine Pulver bomb hoax scandal. Gatekeeping in the media is no more prevalent than in the daily news cycle. It is essential in determining which events will be reported on. As Watson explains, gatekeeping is about opening or closing the channels of communication. It is about accessing or refusing access. There are some situations where gate watchers fail to mediate the amount of coverage an event should receive, mainly because news agencies become tempted to run a story due to its scandalous nature. In doing so, they delegitimise the newsworthiness of the story. Watson believes in the case of the bomb hoax, gatekeeping cues in international coverage of the scandal were taken from local news organisations, with many international reports cooperating with Sydney-based news organisations.
My first response was that this was some form of high school certificate, schoolboy, schoolgirl prank. Early reports that it was in a leafy suburb on the North Shore of Sydney, that there was some link to some text that was being studied in the high school certificate really led me to believe there was some form of joke at play here. Did I think the news coverage was excessive during the scandal? Absolutely. In the first instance, the fact that the young woman was made safe was excellent work by the New South Wales Police. And in the first instance, the response from the senior commanders on the scene was fantastic. They were very communicative and they made it clear to the television, radio and print news crews that were there what they knew, what they could talk about and what they couldn't. From television and radio, excellent and immediate reporting. It then went downhill from there. Maddie was made safe, so suddenly, where's the next story? We had to know all about Maddie's mum, Maddie's dad, which school Maddie went to. And that's when it started going down seriously. News directors need to hang their heads in shame. The key elements for the public interest were, what is the girl's name? What happened? Is she safe? Are police investigating? She was made safe. Leave her alone. But no. This was a pretty young girl living in a leafy, expensive North Shore suburb of Sydney. This shouldn't happen to these girls, was the kind of message. There was also an element, if this happened in Parramatta or in other parts of Sydney, would we have seen so much interest? Would we have seen so much interest if it was a Muslim girl? Would we have seen so much interest if there was a young Asian girl? But no, it was a girl from the North Shore going to a really expensive GPS school with rich mum, rich dad. This was really juicy. And the media, particularly television, tried to exploit this. And even the Media Watch program commentated during that period that it was ridiculous, some of the questions that reporters were asking the parents. Silly questions being put to Maddie.
Considering the amount of coverage given to the extradition of the accused and judging from the style of reports to date, it is certain we will see more of Madeleine Pulver saturating the media around the world again soon.
The story still is developing. We don't know the outcomes of the court case at this time, and it will be interesting to see. And poor Maddie is going to have to go through that whole process again.
There was no bomb, but it was a terrifying drama all the same. A teenage girl is...
The direct quote that came from the lead officer in charge in the investigation. And
first, the latest developments on Sydney's collar bomb extortion threat, including...